Good morning. Welcome back to one of our live stream classes here for beginner woodworkers modeling in Fusion 360. We're going to start here with our basic modeling software, Fusion 360. This is a clean installation of Fusion. This is the academic license because I am a teacher, and if you are a student or a teacher, you can get this for free from Autodesk. And if you are a hobbyist woodworker, if you're not making money from it, you can also get it for free. The free version for hobbyists is slightly different, but it will look exactly the same. It's just missing a few of the features, and I'm not going to use any of those advanced features today or in any of these live stream beginner classes. So whichever you get, it will be perfectly fine for all of them. The only thing I'm going to change from the default is I'm going to right-click on our square over here and change it to perspective with ortho faces, which means all of our lines are going to be straight, so it will look like a three-dimensional model rather than a blueprint. I'm going to be modeling this today in inches because I told my American friends that I would do today's live streams in inches so that it would be easier for them to follow. It makes it a little harder on me because I have to do the conversions in my head from my native metric. But if you'll cut me some slack if I make any weird statements about measurements, I will do my best to do some of these in the future in inches as well. So we're going to be modeling a stool today. We've modeled some other stools, some curved ones, and some milking stools, but this one is going to be a bit different. We're going to make a square stool. And when I say square, we're going to make a stool where pretty much everything is built to be square. And this, I think, is a really neat, simple modern design that anybody can build, and it shouldn't take you very long. So we're going to start by clicking on this new sketch, and we're going to model from the top down. The first thing that I like to do when I make a sketch is create a center point rectangle and create from the center a box. Now, because this is going to be a square stool, I want to make the two sides equal. So I'll click on this equals constraint, and I will click on one side, then the other. Now those two sides are exactly equal, and I will hit escape to get out of that tool. Now I will go over here, and I will click on the dimension tool, click on any of the sides, because they're all the same, and click on the background. Now how big is our square actually going to be? Well, we're going to model this to be a 16-inch stool, which is a lot bigger than our view screen. So I will scroll down with the scroll button on my mouse, and I now have a 16-inch square. And I will hit escape to get away from the dimension tool. Now, that's not the stool itself, that's the boundary of the stool. So I'm going to actually just double-click on any of those sides to select all four, and I'm going to hit X, and it's going to turn that into a dotted guide line, which doesn't actually impact anything in terms of cutting up the sketch. It's just going to show us where the outside lines are. Now, what we want to do is we want to create a square leg. So I'll create this with a center point rectangle, and I am going to create a square leg. It doesn't matter where I draw it, just somewhere I want to draw a square leg. And we're going to make that square leg so that it is a little bit inset from the outside. So I'm going to hit the equal sign, and I'm going to make these two sides equal to each other. Then I'm going to go to the dimension tool, and I'm going to make a dimensional choice that each one of these legs is going to be 1 3/8 inches on all four sides. Now, I want to know where to put that. If I'm going to have that inset from the outside edge, a certain dimension, all I have to do is, again, with the dimension tool selected, select the outside edge, select the side of the leg, and I need to type in a measurement. Now, I'm going to have this inset 1 inch from the outside. But I'm going to have it inset 1 inch from the outside in both directions. So from the side and from this side, 1 inch. But instead of typing in 1 inch, I'm just going to say it's going to be equal to this by clicking on the 1 inch already there. The reason I do that is not because I forgot it's going to be an inch. It's because if I change this inset measurement here, I want it to change the other one. And if I link them together like this, every time I make one change, I make the other. Now you can always drag these measurements around so that they're easier to see. I'll drag that one over there, and I'll drag this one over here to be right next to it so that I can see that they're both an inch. Make sense? We can put this one down here so they're even closer to each other. And this one, this is an inch and 3/8. So we'll keep that in mind. And our 16 is the dimension of the outsides of the box. Now, we have that already done. If we were going to model this easily, we would be able to make, in theory, our top and one leg. Not quite a box yet. What are we going to do about everything else? Well, we want some stretchers. We want stretchers at the top, and we want some rails. We want rails at the top, and we want some stretchers down below for our stool. The stretchers are going to be almost at the floor, but they're going to be exactly the same size and shape as our rails, which are going to be, remember, this is a square stool, they're going to be squares. So let us take, again, our tool, our rectangle box, and we're going to zoom in, and we're going to draw a box that is exactly, actually we're going to use our center point rectangle for this, and we're going to draw a center point rectangle that goes from somewhere inside that square to somewhere else inside that square, still in that left top quadrant. Okay? Now, I want that to be exactly in line with the center of that square piece. Actually, I want that to be exactly the same size as that center piece. And that makes it very easy. So in these constraints, what I want to do is I am going to make, with the coincident constraint, this point the same as this point. I'm going to make this point the same as this point. And I am going to make this line line up with the center point down here. So now we have this exactly in the right place. Now there is one other thing that we have to take into account, and that is that we're going to have to join these pieces of wood together. We're not modeling in metal where we would just weld them, and we're not modeling in plastic where if it was going to be constrained with the plastic, it would probably just be molded as a single piece. But in wood, we have to deal with joinery. So that means we are going to make a decision about how to join these together. What I'm going to do is I'm going to join them together using a through mortise and tenon, which is probably the most common joint to be used. But for now, we're not going to worry too much about the mortise and tenon. We're going to worry more about making these three-dimensional models. So our through mortise and tenon is going to go, oh, wait a second, no. Through mortise and tenon, let's just make it a blind mortise and tenon, which is going to make it a lot easier to model, and it's going to be plenty strong for us. So we'll change our minds and make this a blind mortise and tenon. Our mortise is going to be cut into our leg, and our tenon is going to be cut as part of this rail. We're going to cut the rail tenons and the stretcher tenons to be all the same size. So we're not going to worry too much about it for the moment, but we will deal with that after. We're going to come back to this sketch in a minute, but we'll say finish sketch now. First, I want to draw the leg. So I will come up here and I will click Extrude. I will click on the leg blank, and I'm going to drag that down. So you can see it's going negative. How big do I want this stool to be? Well, we're going to give it a nice thick top. The top is going to be 1.5 inches thick. So we want the stool to be a square, and that means we're going to make this. Wait a second. Yeah, we want our stool to actually be 14.5 inches, but that needs to be negative to go in the opposite direction. And we're going to say new body. Now our sketch is going to disappear, so we can open it back up and turn it on by clicking the little eye. And we're going to model part of a stretcher, part of a rail. Again, we want it to go down, and we're going to see how big this piece is. Do you remember how big that is? Well, we're going to say it might be an inch. I know it's not an inch, but we're going to say it's an inch. I'm going to check to see how big it is, though, to show you how to use the measurement tool. If I click on this Inspect, and I click on this line and the other line, it'll tell me it is 1.375 1.375 inches, which is an inch and 3/8. So if I go back here and I look at the bottom, this gives us my history. If I right-click on that extrude function and hit Edit Feature, and I change this from -1 to -1 and 3/8, and I hit OK, it has now changed it to be an actual square that is going out from the side of that piece. All right, we're doing pretty well so far. Now, let's make our mortise and tenon. We've got a few other design decisions that I want to talk about in here, and I'm thinking about them, and as we see them, we might change our mind on how some of them work. I'm going to show you exactly how that can be done. But for now, I'm going to draw the outside face of our tenon on the outside face of this leg. Now, I can't see where that other piece is. I know it's an inch and 3/8 down, but I want to be able to see it. So I'm going to open up my bodies, and I'm going to turn off the leg. I'm going to hit P for project, and I'm going to click on this end of the rail and hit OK. And what project does is it allows me to copy the dimensions of any other object so that I can see them in my sketch. So now I see this. Well, I want to draw a square tenon on the end of that piece. So I'm going to draw a line going right from corner to corner. I'm going to hit Escape, click on the line, and hit X to make it a guide. So it's not going to divide anything up. But that line goes right through the center. Now if I hit Center Point Rectangle, and I find the center, you can see there's a little triangle telling me it is the center. So that's the middle of that line, and I'm going to draw a box. Now, I want that to be equal, which we've already done, one and then the other. So it is a square, and I'm going to give it a dimension. Click on the Dimension tool, click on any side, and I'm going to make that 5/8 of an inch. And that is the dimension of my tenon when I look at it from the end. Now, if I hold Shift, even in a two-dimensional sketch, I can rotate around and see where I'm drawing. And I can now see that I have drawn that on the end of that piece. Now, if I drew this and I was going to have a tenon that went all the way through, and then I put another piece on there and had a tenon that went all the way through, well, I would suddenly have a huge problem because those tenons would actually interact with each other. So we have a decision to make about these tenons. I can either make them through tenons, and they will conflict, so I can't have both of them through. I can only have one of them through and then one of them be blind. Or I can make them blind tenons, both of them, and they go in, and one goes in part way and the other one goes in part way. Or, and I think this is what I'm actually going to do, I can make these on one side I will have one tenon, and on the others I'm going to have two square tenons. And I'll show you how to do that now in a second. But if I'm going to do that, this tenon is a bit large. So I'm going to double click on it and say that's a 1/2 inch instead. And we're going to have two other tenons go right through. Rethinking that, we could have one tenon on the bottom and one tenon on the top. That would also work. So there's lots and lots of ways we can do it. I think we're going to take a look at this and make it 5/8, like we said before, and we're going to just have a blind one going in from the other side, which is totally legitimate. Now if we hit Finish Sketch, we now see that we have a tenon right here. We want to make that a through tenon, so I am going to say that it is going to be extruded from the outside here, going in, which means it's going to be negative, but instead of distance, we're going to say to object, and rotate around, and it is going to go all the way to the inside face of this leg. Now, it's going to say cut, but we want to change that so it is a new body. And that new body is going to be right there. We haven't cut a hole for it yet, but it is exactly where we want it to be. We'll turn off that sketch so it doesn't get confusing. And I am going to add that tenon to that piece of the leg. So I will say combine. See, cut, no, join. Turn off keep tools, and I'm going to add that rail to, and I can just go up here on the left. I don't have to worry about clicking on it on the diagram. I can just hit body 3 and hit OK. And now you can see I only have two bodies, this leg and this rail. So if I turn off the leg, you can see the rail has a big square tenon on it. But if I turn off the other one, I haven't actually made a hole yet. So now if I go back to combine, and I take the target being the leg, and the tool being the rail, and I change this to cut, I'll turn keep tools on because I don't want it to delete the rail, and hit OK. If I turn off the rail, I now have a mortise that goes all the way through. And it's exactly the size of the thing that we used to cut it, which is that part of that rail. Now that's great. Something that we want to think about is we want the same thing on the other side of this leg, but instead of it being a through tenon, we're going to have it be a blind tenon and only go in as far as the inside of the tenon we already have. So if I say I want to mirror that across that corner, that means it's like sticking a 45-degree mirror up against that corner. So I'm going to say construct plane at angle, and I'm going to turn 45 degrees and hit OK. Now, I think we've actually gone the wrong direction on that, but we'll see in a second. If I say mirror, and I check this, and I click on that mirror pane that I just created, it's going to put that totally off in the wrong direction. But that's okay. We don't have to worry about it. I'll hit OK, and it's going to be in the wrong direction, but we don't have to think about it, because I can go back to the history, say Edit Feature, and I can drag it all the way around to be 135, which is 45 in the other direction. Doesn't want me to drag it, I'll just type it in. 135, and now you can see it has mirrored it across this edge. If you look at this mirror plane, you can see it's just like actually putting a mirror there at a 45-degree angle. Now, how do we deal with the fact that these two mortises, if we turn off this leg, and these two tenons are intersecting with each other? Well, I want to cut the end of one of those tenons off. I want to cut the end off this one that we just made. So I'm going to say slice body, that body, and I'm going to slice it with the inside face of this tenon. I'll just zoom in, and now I'll pick this inside face. And you can see it's going to cut it off. So now we have one piece and another piece. If we right-click on it and hit remove, that part of the tenon is gone, and the only part we have left is the segment of the tenon we're actually going to use to join those pieces together. If we turn back on the leg, we can do the same thing. We will cut our leg with our piece that has the tenon on it. And now if we turn them off and rotate around, we can see we have one through mortise and one blind mortise right there in our leg, exactly fitting the pieces that are going to fit into it. Now, one of the nice things that we can think about is that we've now done all the basic joinery for our stool. But, and this is a fairly significant but, we want to have a stretcher that is close to the bottom that is exactly the same as the two that we have up here. So if I go up here and I say create rectangular pattern, and I pick these two bodies, and I say I want a direction, and it is the up and down direction. I'll drag them down. Now, I don't need 3, I only need 2. So I'll change it to 2, and now I look at it. Where do I want that stretcher to be? Well, I want it to be about there, spaced 9.5 inches down, and I can always move it. Let's say we want it 10 inches down, and I can say OK. Once it processes, there we go. Now we have the square stretchers. Now, of course, if we turn those two off, we don't have any any mortises for those tenons. So we'll do the same thing. We'll cut our leg with one side, and we will cut our leg with the other side. We will cut our leg. If you select the wrong one, you can just turn it off. Cut our leg with the other side. And if we turn all 4 of these off, we'll see that we now have mortises for all 4. Now this is getting a little confusing over here in the model. So what I'd like to do is create a few components. So I'll say a new component. A component is just a group of bodies that you can change and group and hold together. You can even put components in components. Think of a component like a file folder. You can put a file folder inside another file folder, and you can put pieces of paper inside one of them. So you put the papers into a file folder, then you sort the folders into another folder, and you can sort all of those into another folder, and that's how components really work. So we're going to say legs. We only have one so far, but we're going to drag our leg into our legs component. We're going to say another new component, and our new component is going to be rails and stretchers. We're not going to worry too much about keeping them separate. This is a really simple model. We're going to put all 4 rails and stretchers in a rails and stretchers component. The reason I've done this with the capital letters in the middle is just to make it easier to read. You don't have to do that. You can just type it all lowercase. You can put a capital letter on the first one. Totally up to you. The names are just for your reference. It calls them component 1, component 2, component 3, just like it does body 1, body 2, body 3. And this is just to make things a little easier for you. Now, I have this already here, and I'm looking at this, and I think I'd like to go back and make a change to my design. And the reason I want to make that change is because I want to make it look more square. So I'm going to go back and edit this, and I'm going to drag this piece down so that it is actually closer to the ground. And that feels more like a square to me. And that's fine. Now, we're still missing the top component here, but we'll go back and put the top on in a second. The first thing we want to do is we want to have 4 legs. And we want to have complete rails and stretchers. So if I say that I want to mirror these two stretchers, these two bodies, and I want to mirror them across the center line and join them to each other, and I do the same thing, repeat, and I pick these two and mirror them across the center line. Well, I seem to be already doing pretty well. I've already got them there, and that's pretty good. Now, I want to be able to do the same thing with the legs. I will mirror this leg across the center line, and I will mirror this leg. I will mirror both these legs across the center line again. And now you can see where we're going with this. I will mirror these two across the center, and I will mirror these two across the center. There are other ways to do this, and I will explain some of them in the more advanced sessions we do in the future. But for now, if you can just get the hang of doing basic mirrors across center lines, I think you will be very happy with the results, and you'll be able to do everything that way. Sometimes it can get a little slow, but that's okay. Now, the thing we're missing here is the obvious part, the top. So let's hit Extrude, but remember, the top is in our sketch. and we haven't even finished it yet. So let's go back to our sketch 1 and hit Edit Sketch. And this tells us something really interesting. Remember where we were thinking about this as being a square? Well, this is inset. I wonder if that's going to look okay. Well, we'll give it a shot and try. That's half the reason we model. We're going to pick all 4 sides. And instead of just using them as guides, we're going to turn them back in by hitting X to regular sides and hit Finish Sketch. We'll hit Extrude, turn our first sketch on, and remember, we have to make sure that we select all we need. So yes, that's the outside, but it also covers these 2 pieces. So make sure that the blue part is the part you want to model. Now, we're going to model this to be 1.5 inches thick. We're going to make it a new component and hit OK. Let's call that component top. And we'll look at our stool. And our stool, if we turn the sketch off to get it out of the way, actually looks pretty good. I was thinking I might change this to make the stool actually have a real square edge on it and have them line up. But you know, I think they actually look better this way. The only thing that I would like to do is I would like to go in here and I'd like to chamfer the bottom edge of this. I will select all 4 bottom edges. Come on, rotate around. And I am going to make those go in 1/8 of an inch. Because I think that that will set the bottom off, the top off from the underside. You'll probably want to break all the edges, but I think a nice heavy chamfer. I wonder what that'll look like with a 1/4 inch. Let's type it in. The beauty of modeling. A 1/4 inch looks even more like it's separating the top from the sides. I think that's great. Now, something that we want to keep in mind is that the grain direction matters in these cases. We haven't attached the top down yet, but look at this. This is the grain direction of the top, and yes, the top is probably going to have a grain direction like that. But this piece here on the side, not a chance. So if we right-click on it and say Texture Map Controls, and we drag that down, and we go 90 degrees off, well, now it's facing down in the wrong direction, but let's turn it 90 degrees the other way. And we will have grain going in the right direction for our model. Do I do that every time? Well, no, not necessarily. But if you want to see exactly what you're dealing with in terms of grain direction, you can rotate things around in your model. Oops. Move up. Let's rotate it around 90 degrees. And I now have grain that is going along the length the way that I would actually build it in real life. Now, we have to think about this in terms of the grain direction when we're going to be joining this thing down. This is probably a glued up panel here for the top, and we want to join it down, but we can't glue it to the top. If we glue it to the top, it's either going to crack, or it's going to split somewhere, or it's going to split one of the panels out from where it is. So what we need to do is we have to have a better method for attaching it. What I would suggest doing is using dowels. Because if you use some dowels, you can elongate the dowel holes when you actually drill them in. We're not going to model them elongated, but you can actually put in some dowels along the length of these rails, put the dowel holes into the top, make the dowels, glue the dowels right into the top, but have the outside ones float in this rail. So let's actually put some of those dowels in. We'll turn off our top, and we're going to create a new sketch on the top of one of our rails. I want to draw a new guideline that goes down the center because I want all my dowels to be centered. And I will click on it and hit X to make it a guideline. I'm going to click on this circle tool, and from the middle of that line, I'm going to draw a circle. I will go to my dimension tool, click on the dimension, and I'm going to make that a 1/2 inch dowel. by typing in a 1/2 inch. I think that's a pretty good start. Now, you're going to think, oh, well, now I have to draw some other half. Nope, no drawing necessary. We're just going to hit Extrude, click on our 1/2 inch dowel, and we're going to say that that is going to go symmetrical, 1 inch. It'll go 1 inch down into our rail and 1 inch up into our top. We'll say New Component and hit OK. All well and good. Now, remember, we're not going to model the elongated holes along this side here, but the ones other than the center hole are probably going to be elongated, and I would only glue this in just the center on both sides, and I would glue it either to the top or to the rail. In this case, I would glue them to the top, but it'll work either way. I would glue it to the top because it's going to be easier to get them in that way. So now, instead of there being one, I actually want there to be several. So I will click on this rectangular pattern. Then I will say I want it to go in the direction of side to side. And I'll drag it out. Okay? But spacing, symmetric. Now, we want these to be a little further apart than that, and 3 dowels will probably do it. We'll space them 4 inches apart and hit OK. So now we have 3 dowels. Now, how are we going to get them on the other side? You guessed. We're going to hit Mirror, pick our 3 dowels, select a mirror pane, mirror it across the center, and hit OK. Now we have 6 dowels. We're going to rename our component Dowels. Now, on our top, which is hidden, if we turn it back on, you can see that our dowels are going partway into our top, right? They're going up 1 inch into our 1.5 inch thick top. So if we combine our target, which is our top, we open up our dowels folder, and we select all 6 of our dowels and hit OK. We can repeat that for, let's turn off the top, for this side by selecting all 6 and cutting. And we'll combine, and we'll do the same combine for the other side by selecting all 6 and cutting. If you cut with something that doesn't actually touch it, it doesn't matter. So it's easier just to select all of them than to just select the subset. Okay, now we already have that in place. And if I turn off the dowels, and I turn off the rails and stretchers, and I turn back on the top, we'll look at the bottom, and it has our dowel holes already drilled in it. Turn off that plane because it's getting in the way. If we zoom in, see, we have our holes. If I turn off the top, and I turn on the rails and stretchers, and I look at the top, now we have 6 holes right there. Now those would be elongated, and I could show you how to model that, but I wouldn't worry too much about it. It's a construction detail, and there's only so much reality you want to do. So now we have all of those parts, and that is all okay. Apparently I'm running out of power today. I should probably plug it in, but we're good. We're almost finished for the day. So we have our square stool. We have our mortise and tenons. We have our top. We have our wood movement compensating dowel joinery that gets our top on without actually breaking it. Now remember, this wood panel is going to expand in this direction, out from the center of the tree. It is not going to expand in any significant way along its length. So if we look, we're not going to have to worry too much about that because we haven't constrained it in the direction it is going to expand. We're going to leave some space on the outside dowels and make sure that we only glue them in on one side so that the center one holds it in the middle and the outside gives it room to float. But when we put the top on, it will expand in this orientation left to right, and we have no dowels on the sides, which means it is not going to be constrained that way, and it can expand and contract. A piece this big, if this is flat sawn oak or maple, it's probably going to expand and contract no more than about 1/8 of an inch total across the entire year of but an eighth is plenty big to crack a slab that size. So we have to always take that into account. Anyway, that's our simple model. We can always move some of those components around if we want to, but I think that looks pretty good. If you want to build this, feel free. If you want to use that as a basic design for anything, just comment below that you'd like to grab our Fusion files, and I'll happily send them over to you. If you have any comments, you can leave them down below. Questions, anything that you can suggest, or anything you would like us to answer and model in the future, because we do a lot of these live classes, and you're welcome to come back and join us later. If you've liked this video, please click the like button. If you haven't, click the dislike button, but please tell us why you didn't like it so we can help fix it for you later and come back and check to make sure we did, because we're not just asking, we really do want to make these videos more helpful for our students. If you want to see more content, because we do lives on a regular basis, you can click subscribe and ring the bell so you'll get notified every time we go live. And if you have any friends who are also into woodworking like you and I, you can share it on your social media, or you can send a link to the video right to them. So thank you very much for joining us. We are done for this video. Have a great day in your shop, modeling and building the things in your mind. Thanks again. Bye-bye.